Like, I shouldn't have had to be my mom's therapist. My mom should have been there for me. The only two times that I've ever known my mom to be like just so much joy is when my dad was pretty much no longer in the picture. Even though all four of us kids were crying ourselves to sleep and grieving our dad as if he was dead. I mean, they don't alienate alone. They wouldn't get very far on their own.
I remember having a thought in college, the way that my mom wants us to be the same person, it's suffocating me. I hate it. And I remember thinking, but this is all I've got. Because at the time, in my head, I didn't have my dad. Hi, Bri, and welcome to the Anti-Alienation Project. Bri, if you could just give a brief introduction to people watching about who you are and what you're passionate about doing here.
I'm Bri. I am also a former alienated child. So I've gone through this when my parents got a divorce and had a very messy custody battle. I came to realize as an adult after I was married and had my own kids that I was an alienated child. Now I feel like it's my life's mission to spread awareness about this really sad issue.
Thank you. And very, very common issue too. Being an alienated child and then learning the truth as well. I think both of those experiences have impacted my parenting a lot. I have this irrational fear of repeating the cycle, like as if it's beyond my control because of my genetics almost. Because I'm so afraid of hurting them anyway, like I've been hurt. I don't know if you can relate to that, but that is a big struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I feel like I really struggle a lot with perfectionism for a long time. I mean, I guess I still struggle with this. I have a hard time even crying in front of my kids. And I grew up being mommy's little therapist. So I saw my mom cry all the time. And I just, obviously I think that that's really, really inappropriate. Like, I shouldn't have had to be my mom's therapist. My mom should have been there for me to help me get through my struggles. And so I never want to burden my kids with my emotions. So, like, that's something that I struggle with. And, in my therapy, my counselor was like, it's okay if your kids see you cry every once in a while. They need to see that you're resilient. But that is still so hard for me.
It's beautiful and it's also challenging because then you see your kids become the age. For example, my daughter, she's almost 5. Like when I was a little girl, I played dollhouse with my dad every night before bed, and it was our special thing. And then I would happen to be in the thrift shop recently, and I found the same dollhouse I had when I was a kid, so I got it for my daughter. And then my dad visited this May, and there was a moment one night where they were playing dollhouse together with the same dollhouse that I had when I was a kid. Such a surreal moment. To watch him be so loving with my kids, it's like it just hits me in the face. I wasn't just a little wrong, I was really wrong about him.
Yeah.
It's time that you don't get back.
Yeah. I think that's the hardest thing is that you don't get to just hit a rewind button and, get your graduation day back or your wedding day or when your kids were babies. I struggle a lot with that, because my kids, my oldest will be 16 in January. And I'm like, all this time that he has missed with his grandkids. It's really hard because, like, not only do I feel like the opportunity to have a functional, like, father-daughter relationship has closed, but it's also closed on, like, that relationship with my children because they're older. Like, my youngest is 8. So it's not like they're at that age where they're like, oh, sit on grandpa's lap and read a story. They're like all kind of beyond that now. So even though I'm working on rebuilding my relationship with my dad, it's like we've lost so much time.
That must be so hard, especially when you had so much lost time without any contact.
It's weird because I was alienated twice, like when I was a teenager and then an adult, because my mom sabotaged my relationship that I had rebuilt with my dad. Long story. And that was when I was pregnant with my youngest child, which is another thing too that just really gets to me is that My mom has never been a real happy person, but the only two times that I've ever known my mom to be like just so much joy is when my dad was pretty much no longer in the picture. So when she succeeded in alienating us, like with the court battle stuff, and she told us that we won, she was so just gleefully happy, even though all four of us kids were crying ourselves to sleep and grieving our dad as if he was dead, because that's how it felt. It was just nothing. Um, and then after she succeeded in sabotaging the relationship that we had rebuilt with him, and I was 28, I think, at the time, and she had sabotaged our relationship and it fell apart. Again, she was so happy. And that's the thing that I just don't understand. Like the times where your kids are devastated and heartbroken and you see it, like there wasn't any way she could ever say, well, I didn't know you were hurting. We cried in front of you. You heard us cry ourselves to sleep. You know, I was pregnant at the time, and so was one of my other sisters. And we both struggled so bad with depression when we were pregnant, and both had postpartum depression after we had our babies going through all this. And my mom was happy. And as a mom, I can't wrap my mind around that.
I can't either. It's completely depraved.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Gosh, you just deserve so much better than that. We all deserve so much better than that. You're one of the only people I've met who've been through this from the child's point of view that made the decision themselves to not have a relationship with their alienator parent anymore. I know how hard that decision is to make. And all the research says that the alienator, if the child learns the truth, they will try to sabotage and destroy the reconnection between the targeted parent and the child. There's no easy answer, you know? Like there's really, I don't think there is ever an easy answer if you do decide to stay in the relationship or if you cut all contact. I wonder if you've had any like negative ramifications from that.
Yeah, it definitely has because I mean, they don't alienate alone. They wouldn't get very far on their own.
Yeah.
At least in my case, she had a lot of support. She had, you know, her parents, she had you know, my grandparents' friends, she had extended family. And the extended family was more like distant, but they would hear her side of the story and believe her. But my grandparents, I think it's been the hardest just because they don't want to believe that they raised somebody who would do something so terrible. And so they try to like say, oh, well, she was just trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From what? I should have been able to have both of my parents in my life. And instead, I was robbed of that. And when I was in my late 20s, I didn't need her to protect me from anyone. Like, I was married, you know, I'm an adult. Why couldn't I decide to have a relationship with my dad without interference from my mom?
You're not a child at that point. You can't use that
Yeah.
anymore. I admire your resilience. It's nice to know that other people have needed to make that same decision, although I hate that you've had to go through this and that I wish you hadn't gone through this. There's a difference making that decision as the child versus having it just go that direction or having the parent make that decision. I kind of assumed that most people would make that choice.
I'm kind of surprised by that. That more
I,
haven't made that choice. I was like my mom's therapist. Like I always had a responsibility to her to help her regulate her emotions, to give her advice, to prop her up, make her look good. So that was my role. And at one point I did think that I was close to my mom, which is really sad because I now that looking back at it, like that was enmeshment. That wasn't a true, genuine, close, supportive relationship. That was enmeshment. I was being tangled with somebody. Felt like I was in a spider web, and I'm like, how do I get out of this?
gosh, that hits so close to home for me. So close to home. I remember having a thought in college being like, the way that my mom wants us to be the same person, it's suffocating me. I hate it. And I remember thinking, but this is all I've got. Because at the time, I didn't, in my head, I didn't have my dad. I'll accept this, even though it's dysfunctional, even though it's harming me. I'll accept it because it's all I've got.
Yeah. Which, yeah, I mean, if you've completely cut the other parent out, it's so hard because I did feel after I cut my mom and stepdad out of my life and still really didn't have very much contact with my dad. Now I'm on speaking terms with my dad, but it's still not like a father-daughter relationship. But I remember thinking after I estranged myself from my mom, like, I'm an orphan. Like, I don't have parents at all. I have nothing. I have no inheritance. My kids don't have grandparents from my side of the family. There's just nothing. And it was just really, really sad, 'cause obviously it's not what I wanted. Of course, I want my kids to have grandparents. Of course, I'd love to have, great relationship with two healthy parents, but
Yeah.
it's just not what I have.
It's sad. It's like what you were saying at the end of the panel, like to the alienating parents out there. I mean, if your kid figures out the truth, there's a great chance that you will lose them, like, which is their biggest fear in the first place, I think. Maybe if people could learn that, maybe that would be enough to get them to I don't
I
know.
feel like maybe there's not a whole lot of hope for the kind of people who are like my mom who alienate. Like, I just think she's set in her ways. But I think maybe there's hope for the people around them who become enablers, where it's like, okay, so somebody getting a divorce and they have kids. Like, what is your response to that? Are you going to join them in bashing their ex-spouse and support them no matter what, even if they're telling their child that their other parent doesn't love them? Or are you going to stand up and say, like, this is not healthy. You're going to ruin your kids. Like there's research that says like that is extremely harmful to your child. Like, don't do that. Like, I have more hope in helping other people recognize alienation tactics, even if people who alienate are always going to do what they do. At least if they don't have people supporting them in alienation, maybe it won't solidify like it did in my situation.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Because my grandma joined in on all of it. My mom fooled the entire extended family. I mean, they since have realized, some of them have realized the truth and apologized to my dad. Like,
Yeah.
they had the complete wrong idea. And it totally solidifies it for the kid. Because if it's not just your mom saying that, it's all the community or other family members, well, then it's definitely true.
And I hope that, with more awareness, that people will see it as a responsibility, like a societal responsibility to not let this happen. You would say something if you knew somebody was molesting a child. As a decent human being, if you knew that there was somebody who was abusing a child like that, you would make sure that that gets reported, or you would make sure that that gets confronted. Like, you wouldn't sit there and do nothing. This should be another situation where people don't just sit back and do nothing, and then when it happens they're just like, oh well, oh, I didn't realize that that was a problem. It's like, it causes lifelong damage. At 30, almost 38 years old, I still feel damaged by this. I don't think that I will ever not hurt over what happened to me as a child and as an adult, because it happened as an adult too. There will never be a point in my life where this doesn't hurt anymore. And it's like, it's totally avoidable.
Yeah.
And I don't think that my mom would have made different choices. I think that maybe she would have chosen to do what she did anyways, but it would have made a really big difference if my grandparents wouldn't have joined her in that. And if she wouldn't have even brought teachers along to keep the alienation, because that's another thing too, is how they are able to manipulate teachers. They can just walk in there and say, like, oh, well, he's abusive. So if he comes to the school, let me know, even with no court orders. Like,
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
teachers are just ignorant of what the law actually says, and they get involved in this and they have no idea that they are helping someone alienate the other parent from their child. My husband was a teacher for 16 years and it happens so often. I'm glad that they actually did address, some things like in a professional development on like what the law says, on like how you're supposed to handle divorced parents and blah, blah, blah. But I think that it is really easy for teachers to get sucked into alienation without even realizing it.
I mean, of course it is, because think about how easy it is for therapists to get sucked into it. And they should know. They should be the ones who have the red flags going up, right? Like for an alienated kid, but no. I can't
No,
tell you how many therapists enforced it for me. I remember therapists that were like so happy for me when I went no contact again with my dad. It definitely reinforced it. So I'm glad that we're having these conversations. I just want to say thank you for chatting. It's nice to not be just talking to myself in these videos.
yeah,
I'm sure other people appreciate a new voice too.
yeah,
So hopefully you can be in some other videos soon. So thanks, Bree.
yeah, you're welcome.